What if the space you think you're living in isn't a fixed stage, but something your consciousness is actively shaping moment by moment? Most of us move through life like the world is solid, settled, decided. Sky above, ground below, you here, everything else out there. But at the end of modern physics, and the strangest corners of consciousness research, there's a provocative idea that refuses to go away. Reality may not fully lock in until it's observed. In quantum mechanics, a system can exist in multiple possible states until measurement. That reduction, from possibility to one actual outcome, is often called collapse. And here's where it gets interesting. Thinkers like John von Neumann and Eugene Wigner argued that consciousness might be the missing ingredient in that collapse. Not a camera, not a detector, a knower, a conscious observer. Even today, researchers continue to wrestle with what exactly counts as an observation, and whether consciousness plays a fundamental role. Philosophers and scientists have revisited these questions through frameworks like integrated information theory, exploring how a conscious act could introduce a kind of directional push, an asymmetry that turns potential into structure. In plain language, awareness may not just witness reality, it may help select it. Now take that idea out of the lab and bring it into the inner world, into transformation. People who explore deep states of meditation, intense personal awakening, or radical psychological change often describe something that sounds eerily similar to collapse, but in the realm of identity, a narrowing from countless ways of being into one new coherent self. And that shift can feel like stepping out of one universe and into another. Here's the paradox. The more your consciousness knows itself, the more it begins to notice the space it's living inside. Not just physical space, perceptual space. The invisible frame that tells you what's possible, what's real, what you can and cannot be. And when that frame changes, it can feel like space itself changes. There's a reason transformation stories are so disorienting. Think of the caterpillar and the butterfly. Inside the chrysalis, the old structure breaks down. The new one assembles. But the caterpillar doesn't upgrade. It becomes something else. The old identity can't even fully comprehend the new identity. And in human transformation, that can come with a kind of amnesia. Not always literal memory loss, but a deep emotional forgetting. You look back at the old you and think, how did I ever live like that? How did I not see what I see now? Some modern theories of consciousness transformation describe this as a reconfiguration, your mind collapsing into a new harmonic coherence, a new stable pattern of self. Old assumptions dissolve, new perception locks in. You don't just get new thoughts, you get a new world. And here's where the story gets electric. If consciousness helps define reality at the quantum level, then changing consciousness could change the way reality appears, and possibly the range of what it can reveal. Because the boundary between observer and observed may not be as clean as we were taught. Some researchers argue that in quantum phenomena, the observer isn't a detached spectator. The observer is part of the equation. Reality emerges from potentiality through interaction, and consciousness is the most intimate form of interaction we know. Neuroscience adds another layer. There are hypotheses suggesting that processes in the brain may involve frequent collapses, analogous to quantum state reductions, micro-events that help enforce the stable, classical world you experience. Whether every claim holds up is still debated, but the implication is powerful. Your brain may be continuously translating a sea of potential into the single stream of experience you call life. So what does collapse of space mean in lived experience? It's the moment you realize the space you inhabit, your inner sense of separation, your sense of limitation, was never the full room. It was a position, a stance, a shape your consciousness held in order to navigate. And as that stance loosens, people report an expansion, awareness blooming outward, as if the walls of perception turn transparent. They describe feeling the around, inside the within. They describe presence that doesn't feel trapped behind the eyes, but distributed, like attention becomes the room, the sky, the field. Some even describe moments of blinding clarity, light-like, sun-bright, where the world looks the same, but not at all the same. As if the original state beneath the ordinary world is shining through. Let's be careful. I'm not asking you to believe that someone can literally tear open a portal in the sky like a movie scene. But I am asking you to consider something more unsettling and more practical. How many impossible things stay impossible simply because your consciousness doesn't have the bandwidth to hold them? Because if perception is a kind of collapse, if the mind selects and stabilizes a version of reality, then a sleepy consciousness doesn't just miss what's there. It actively filters it out. Not out of malice, out of conditioning, out of self-protection, out of habit. You don't see what you don't believe is possible, and you don't believe what you've never allowed yourself to see. But when consciousness becomes more awake, more coherent, more self-aware, its capacity expands. The space it can hold expands. And with that expansion, what you notice changes. What you sense changes. What you can become changes. So here's the question that ends this story and starts your next one. What if the biggest limitation in your life isn't your circumstances, but the shape your consciousness is currently collapsed into? If this sparked something in you, curiosity, resistance, excitement, don't ignore it. Sit with it. Observe your observer. Watch the frame that frames your world. Because the moment you start noticing the space you're in, you begin to discover you were never just inside it.